Jadi, oh ini belum dirubah lagi sih. Katanya tadi udah dirubah, kok masih? Nanti kan
Oke, itu.
Selamat pagi Pak Dekan, selamat pagi Pak Dahli, selamat pagi semua.
Selamat pagi Pak Yuswari. Terima kasih, selamat pagi semuanya.
Online kita Pak Dekan. Tadinya saya menduga di ruang multimedia, karena saya jam 9 ngajar juga ya, saya online.
Iya Pak Yuswari. Kebetulan tadi jam 7 memberikan pengarahan di mahasiswa Fakultas Kedokteran.
Oh,
Jadi dari rumah ini. Nanti
ya,
habis ini langsung ke kampus ini.
Siap Pak Dekan. Ya. Ya.
Selamat pagi Pak Dekan, Pak WR1.
Selamat pagi Pak KLPPM.
Ya, sehat Pak?
Sehat, Alhamdulillah.
Pagi juga Pak KLPPM.
Siap.
Mungkin bisa dimulai Pak. Bu Delanya sudah siap mungkin di studio, di multimedia.
Yang 3, 2, 1, mulai.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Vice Rector in Academic Universitas Jenderal Ahmad Yani, or Unjani, and also as Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science, FISIP Unjani, Dr. Agus Subagio, SIP MSI. The Honorable All Vice Dean in FISIP Unjani, Dr. Suartisari, SIP MSI, as Vice Dean in Academic, Dahli Sukma Priyandika, Dr. Andes MSI, as Vice Dean in Employees and Finance, Dr. Agustina Setiawan, as Vice Dean in Student and Alumni. The Honorable Head of Institution in Research and Community Service, or LPPM Unjani, the Honorable Head and Secretary of all department in FISIP Unjani, and the Honorable Secretary of Master Program in International Relations, Mrs. Mariana Delanova SS MA. Also, the Honorable all keynote speakers, Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman, Dr. Cory Wallace, Professor Rosrabani Roy Kuduri, and all the audience, the participant of this international seminar. Let me begin by giving you a warm welcome to the second international seminar, US-China Rivalry in Asia, and the aftermath of Russia's invasion on Ukraine. Today, on Wednesday, March the 9th, 2022. This international seminar is brought to you by Master Program in International Relations FISIP Unjani. And thank you for MIR student who has supported this event. My name is Jusmalia Octavian Sos MA, and I will be the presenter for today's event. Before we begin, allow me to remind you to mute yourself while others are speaking, and please keep your camera on during this webinar. Allow me to read the sequences of our agenda today. The first is the opening. The second is National Anthem of Indonesia Raya. The third is greeting and opening speech. The fourth is photo session. The fifth is the main event, the international seminar from our keynote speaker. The sixth is the giving of token of appreciation. The seventh is singing Bagimu Negeri, and the eighth is closing. Our next agenda is National Anthem of Indonesia Raya. All audience are kindly requested to stand up.
Indonesia, tanah airku, tanah tumpah darahku. Di sanalah aku berdiri, jadi pandu ibuku. Indonesia, kebangsaanku, bangsa dan tanah airku. Marilah kita berseru, Indonesia bersatu. Hiduplah tanahku, hiduplah negeriku, bangsaku, rakyatku semuanya. Bangunlah jiwanya, bangunlah badannya, untuk Indonesia Raya. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, tanahku, negeriku yang kucinta. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, hiduplah Indonesia Raya. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, tanahku, negeriku yang kucinta. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, hiduplah Indonesia Raya.
Please have a seat. Our third agenda is greeting and opening speech. At first, Rector of Unjani has been scheduled for this agenda. However, the opening speech will be delivered by Dean of FISIP and also as Vice Rector in Academic. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Agus Subagio, SIP MSI. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Honorable the speakers, Professor Srabani Roy Choudhury from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. Mr. Corey Wallace, PhD from Kanagawa University, Yokohama, Japan. Mr. Yohanes Sulaiman, PhD from Master of International Relations, General Ahmad Yani University. Mr. Stanley Jatah, PhD, as a moderator from Master of International Relations, General Ahmad Yani University. Vice Deans and Head of Studies Programs in the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, General Ahmad Yani University. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would like to say thank you very much for all the speakers who have agreed to fulfill the committee's invitation to become the speakers in this international webinar. Welcome to General Ahmad Yani University, an Indonesian university fostered by Kartika Eka Paksi Foundation, affiliated to Indonesian Army, Tentara Nasional Indonesia, Angkatan Darat. Secondly, I would like also to thank you for all webinar participants willing to attend an international webinar organized by the Master of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, General Ahmad Yani University. Thirdly, this international webinar took the term US-China rivalry in Asia in the aftermath of Russia's invasion on Ukraine. The purpose of this international webinar activity is to give an overview of knowledge and understanding. All webinar participants, especially students of Master of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, General Ahmad Yani University. We hope this international webinar will be running smoothly and to give enlightenment for all webinar participants. Next, as a dean, I would like to say thank you to the committee to make this international webinar running well until now. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dean of FISIP, Dr. Agus Subagio, SIPMSI, for your speech. The next agenda is photo session. Please the committee to arrange this session. One, two, three. Second, one, two, three.
Ya, yang ketiga duduk Bu, yang di depan. Yang nggak kebagian boleh di pinggirnya sendiri. Di belakangnya aja Pak. Jadi biar terlihat. Dihitung.
On my mark. 1, 2, 3. On my mark. 1, 2, 3.
Sudah cukup ya?
Okay, finish. Thank you very much. All right, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will enter the main program we are looking forward to, which is the International Seminar. This session will be guided by our moderator, Mr. Stanley Jatta, PhD. To begin with, I will read his curriculum vitae. Stanley Jatta, PhD, he is a lecturer in FISIP Unjani, graduated from University of Science Malaysia, PhD in Political Philosophy, and Bandung Theological Seminary, BA and MA in Religious Studies. His research interests are terrorism and religion in international relations. Right now, he is still active as member of the International Studies Association and certified in terrorism financing. Let's welcome our moderator, Stanley Jatta, PhD. The floor is yours.
Boleh.
Gitu.
Oke, silakan Bu. Boleh.
Pindah tempat duduk aja, Pak.
Ya, Pak Stanley di sini aja. Pak Yohanes.
Balik.
Ya, yang
Semoga kamu pakai topi nggak cantik tuh. Kamu pantatnya waduh susah aku jauh.
Kayaknya posisi sih di sini ya.
boleh. Ini clip-on-nya.
Sama Pak Yo disiapin clip-on-nya, Pak Yo disiapin. Pak Yohanes siapin clip-on-nya.
Mungkin biar agak boleh disaksikan. Ini suaranya. Boleh.
Testing. Kantongnya situ dalam.
Iya, jangan 2 kali.
Udah, maaf. Ini tamu-tamu agungnya udah datang belum, itu masalah. Maka si Cory jam 8.30 8.30.
Okay, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main session of our webinar this morning. Our topic this morning is United States-China rivalry in Asia and the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Through this topic, we will discuss several issues. That is, what is the impact of China-United States rivalry against Asia countries? At the same time, we try to get an answer of the simple question: if United States and China are competition in Asia, and then who gets the terrible losses in this competition, and also who gets the biggest advantage? Another things that we need to try to discuss with our guest speakers is what are the role of the middle power countries in Asia, I mean India and Japan. This morning, we have 3 great guest speakers. That is Professor Srabani Roy Choudhury. She holds PhD from the Center of East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. Professor Srabani has several international publications, books, and articles. Her research interests in the area of Japanese investment in India and enjoys micro-level firm studies. Her recent publications are centered on Japan-India economic relations and Japanese multinational experiences in India, their entry strategies, and their survival techniques. Welcome, Professor. Good morning. Can you give us your hello and check your sound, please?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm joining from India, Delhi, and I look forward to a very engaging outing today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next guest speaker is Dr. Corey John Wallace.
Ini belum online kayaknya, dia saya bilang 8.30 ini.
Oh, okay. All right. Dr. Wallace is an assistant professor of Faculty of Foreign Language Studies, Kanagawa University, Japan. He holds PhD in Political and International Relations, University of Auckland, New Zealand. Dr. Wallace's field of specialization is Japanese foreign policy and domestic politics. Also, Asia-Pacific geopolitics, science and technology policy, public opinion analysis. He has international publication as well, books and article on international journal.
Belum datang.
Oh, okay. Our next guest speaker is Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman. He is an assistant professor of international relations, School of Social and Political Sciences, Jenderal Ahmad Yani University. Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman also is a non-resident fellow at the National Bureau of Asian Research, Washington, D.C., United States, USA. He holds PhD in foreign policy from Ohio State University in 2008. Dr. Sulaiman has international publication, book chapter, and article. Also a reviewer of several international journals. Good morning, Dr. Yohanes.
Good morning.
Okay. All right. Before we go to the presentation of our guest speaker, I would like to explain to you the simple guideline of our webinar this morning. Every speaker will have 15 minutes of presentation. And after finish all the presentation, and we will have question and answer. All the participants could send their question by room chat, or you can raise your hand and give your question immediately to the speakers. Okay, thank you. Let's start with our first guest speaker, Professor Srabani Roy Choyduri. Welcome, Professor. Your 15 minutes.
Well, thank you. Can I have a sharing facility to share my slides right now? Excuse me, is it possible for me to share my slides?
Yes, of course. Okay.
But I'm getting, you cannot share slides while other participants are sharing.
Oh, okay.
If you could just, I'm sorry for this inconvenience.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I can share now. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I've been allowed, I'll just do that. Sorry.
Itu presentasi dia tahun lalu itu.
Is my slides visible to all of you?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It comes at a time when each one of us are contemplating what would be the future, given that we have a crisis in hand in the form of Ukraine crisis. I have therefore had to tweak my presentations, and I have made it as a changing world rather than US, China-US rivalry, simply because factoring in the current crisis is basically a way of changing this entire world's equations. Outline of my presentation would look into, obviously, the US-China rivalry and the growing importance of Indo-Pacific as it was till the crisis happened in February. The Ukraine crisis and its implication essentially with India's recalculation, as it would be called. And finally, I would look into the US-India-Japan relationships given the current changing order. Instead of getting into too much of detail over what is the environment of US-China's strategic competition, it is basically rooted in two pillars. That is Chinese authoritarian development approach, that is strong leadership, straight ownership, and alternative to the Western democratic principles of rule-based order, and a principle of individualism to that of authoritarianism, and Chinese essential view that the American goal of maintaining global hegemony is also a way of constraining China. If you look at the entire equation post-Cold War, one would say that we went through three phases of how China looked or interacted with the world. The peaceful rising of China, which was what was definitely more acceptable to the liberal order, was made to move into a different trajectory slowly and surely by the current regime in China, and therefore inflicted among the Asian nations a fear and distrust with respect to the aggressiveness that the Chinese have shown over this period of time. The second phase was when China collectively had engaged with the Asian nations, more particularly among the ASEAN nations, in economic areas, in creating a hub for production facilities in which it intertwined itself along with the ASEAN nations to create a production hub, which became the reason why the focus moved towards this region. Given the second level of engagement economically, China then had moved into asserting itself militarily across South China Sea, East China Sea, and Sea of Japan. It is when this military aggression started in from a Chinese region that the regional order was speculated and involvement of USA was definitely encouraged. And it is this background of the US-China strategic competition began at its earnest in the turn of the 2010. China's strength increases because it became important for USA to maintain certain security commitments in this region. And this commitment was seen in the form of Pivot Asia and subsequently Trump's engagement in this region by pushing for decoupling from China economically. Why was economics used as an option of pushing China to adhere to things? Was essentially because China's remarkable transformation from a source of cheap labor to lead the regional value chain and become a major exporter of capital has certain stronger implications as it actually impinges into US's strong capital presence across the world. The two significant developments that has caused alarm among the Asian nations, especially for India, was the China's One Belt, One Road initiative, which was basically an infrastructural initiative which allowed for massive infrastructure development, which encircled a large area of the world, both in land as well as in maritime Silk Road initiative, as you see in this slide. Alternative to this was what came as a proposed statement from initially Japan, and then collectively took the formation of what we today call the Quad. It was basically an appeal to have a free and open Indo-Pacific. What does the free and Indo-Pacific do to this entire game plan? It basically was trying to create an alternative in which there would be a collective number of countries who would look at creating an environment in which the space, the huge, vast ocean space between the West Pacific and the Indian Ocean, the entire till around Africa, would be free and open, because this particular region has this biggest amount of movement of ships with cargo. And in case of both resources of oil and other supplies of productions would therefore get hampered in case this came under the control of China. It is on this imperative that the Indo-Pacific concept grew. Initially, of course, there were issues and concerns over how or whether how would China be treated within this whole thing, and China's constant badgering of that the fact that this Quad was essentially a formation which would lead to containing China principles, etc. But Quad sidestepped this whole thing and tried to involve ASEAN by accepting ASEAN centrality. Quad accepted the fact that it would not be only associations which would look more towards developing the region rather than talking about military. Under this backdrop, for India, the Indo-Pacific focus had an extra edge. India became an embroidered place because it was geopolitically positioned to take care of the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean has its own issues, but whatever the cause could be, China's presence in Indian Ocean would have a stronger pushback if India could create a stronger presence in Indian Ocean. And therefore, maritime concerns for India with respect to security grew. We would get back to this when I talk about India's recalculation. Apart from that, if you look at this particular slide, you would realize the kind of China's investments in the ports, called initially claimed to be the string of pearl. But if you look at from India's vantage point, we have very closely have to monitor one area, that is the Sri Lanka, which you see in a red dot. This particular place is critical for India because in case of stronger Chinese presence out there, India gets embroiled in two localities. The northern locality where we've already had Chinese incursion in the form of Pokhran and in Galwan current issues, and we have Doklam and Pokhran and Galwan, which happened in the northeast area of India as well as in the northwest area of India. And then you have a presence of China in the southern tip, which actually encircles India in a very critically difficult position. And I will again get back to this when I look at recalculation of India with respect to the current Ukraine crisis. Importance of Indo-Pacific, therefore, is basically the geostrategic and the geoeconomic realities and the growing need to keep Indo-Pacific into free and open to enable peace and prosperity in this region. And the tightening geopolitical consideration with the Ukraine crisis fundamentally questions how this space will change in the current issues that are emerging. The Indo-Pacific for a long time had a very strong direction of how the liberal order would engage with the uprising China. However, with the Ukraine crisis, the entire direction itself seems to be becoming an area of concern or question. We would look into this. I would give it a specific consideration when it comes to the recalculation of what India would like to do probably. If you look at the game that has emerged pre the whole the pandemic and post-Ukraine crisis, if you leave that apart, you would see that in May 2015, Japan's in partnership of equality infrastructure, which Japan promoted, and India being part of the implementation when India got huge infrastructure support from Japan in both with respect to aid as well as private-public partnership, is one which was the starting point. In 2008, India-Japan developed cooperation, which would moved it including Africa, which created a larger space for India to engage. In 2009, in November 2019, when Japan, US, and Australia came up with the Blue Dot Initiative, and India was invited into it, created yet another platform which would have created a balancing act to the BRI and the Silk Maritime route. And these three aspects was going to be way of giving a developmental focus to the thing, leaving the security dynamics out, simply because security dynamics was being engaged upon in the trilateral and the bilateral. And this, in a sense, sidestepped China's concern of containing China. The RCEP and CPTPP were yet another two strategic economic pillar that was created to enable the Indo-Pacific region to grow productively and engage peacefully and inculcate prosperity. The first initiative of military alliance was seen after the post-pandemic, that is the AUKUS, in which UK finds an entry in the form of an alliance with Australia and USA. In this particular alliance, for the first time, you could see a strong security interest being addressed. And this was considered to be a huge game change because Indo-Pacific now has United European nation, UK, embedded in an alliance system. It was also this point of time that you could see lots of European countries coming up with their own Indo-Pacific strategies, which essentially pointed to the fact that Asia and Indo-Pacific region is going to be the main area of interest for the world in the coming decade or so. However, it is the Ukraine crisis which has, to me, come up with three questions that would get addressed. Will there be a new Cold War? I am really doubtful about it, but in Indian press and narratives, there has been strong, advocation that it would create a new Cold War and that India would have to be taking positions with respect to how India would deal with these circumstances. The second question that obviously meant a lot to me was, what will this mean to the ASEAN alliance system? Essentially, the alliance of US, Japan, and whether it would create a space within the region which would lead to a vacuum and therefore expect middle powers to play a larger role. And will America be able to maintain its policy of pivot Asia is something that I would like to engage in. Probably people and other speakers would throw more light into this aspect. If I look at from the Indian point of view, the new Cold War implies to the extent that both China and Russia is going to coming as alliance within the other alliance, as if I may call it so, and which essentially means that can India actually maintain a principle of strategic autonomy, which India believes in? Let me just step back and talk to you about this strategic autonomy that we have persistently followed in our foreign policy. India's birth post-colonial period saw the Cold War. India followed the principle of non-alignment simply because India believed that aligning with one would be detrimental to India because of its geography. India had, at various points of time, seen Russia as a friend in its growth period from being, coming out of a colonialism till around 1970s and 80s. You would see at various points of time, Russia stepped up to help India in its own crises. It is because of this engagement with Russia that India definitely did not want to pivot towards USA, though at the post-2010, there is a strong feeling among narrative within India that India is no longer really maintaining a strategic autonomy. It is shifting towards USA. But if you look at the current problem that Ukraine issue has given, put India in a situation, we already have two neighbors whom we are definitely challenged with respect to our security dynamics. One is China, one is Pakistan. China, if you look at it, in the last few years, we have two big incursions, Doklam and Galwan. In both the incursions, we have had both concerns of losing men and having issues with respect to containing the crisis. Both these things, both these events actually put India in a situation that India seeks to have some amount of peace in this borderlines, because India cannot afford to engage in economic growth program if it is constantly required to look into the security concerns. Given this, you have now Russia, who have essentially been a friend of ours, Russia, who have had a strong engagement of almost 70% of our defense equipments have been procured from Russia. In these circumstances, it is very difficult for India to seek to resist openly Russia's Ukraine aggression. In fact, this is something that has been a reason for India not openly criticizing or openly stating Russia to be an aggressor, simply because by doing so, you face an encirclement of three nations, China, Pakistan, and Russia, three nations who are, of which two of them are definitely far superior in their military capabilities than India. India currently, therefore, needs to really walk a tightrope. By aligning with one would always mean that you lose out on the other. And India's current economic condition has so much of involvement by both these set of countries that to get into any kind of stronger positioning would be detrimental to India's own self-national interest. And it is primarily because of this that India currently is following certain strong notions of accepting the fact that what Russia is involved in Ukraine is definitely, if you look at our statements, we have constantly talked about it as not a right thing. The fact that humanitarian conditions should be given importance, the fact that Ukraine needs to have its own independence way of functioning. While we are saying this, we have not addressed Russia as an aggressor, and that is what has been the major concern internationally. But if you look at it from India's recalculation, you would realize that India is not in a position to openly, openly state Russia as an aggressor. What are the options that India has in this way, in this particular situation? For me, I think India needs to find ways of engaging with other Asian powers. And in this, I mean, while our Look East and Act East policy with in initiatives of Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative policies that we've created, we have essentially reached out to these countries. But what we rightly need to do right now is to create an environment of trust and a calculation in which we pivot ourselves to these nations such that we get a larger help from these nations when need arises. In this particular framework, India-Japan's partnership would become critical. If you look at the current situation when India has not really addressed Russia as an aggressor, among the Quad nations, we are singularly not within the Quad's platform. If you look at Japan, Australia, and USA, all three have stated Russia as an aggressor. We have stepped away. To that extent, we would have issues to face. But then Quad has never been a place where every one of us has been in the same platform, whether it becomes stating India, stating Indo-Pacific to be inclusive, exclusive, etc., which we past has shown. So to the extent that probably this would not become a reasons within the Quad, but Quads would gain importance critical importance for India, because Quad would definitely look into the security concerns. Unfortunately for India, Quad are maritime association, and India's northern flank is a landmass, and to that extent, security concerns of India in the north would have to be addressed by India, and we have to push for a better military capability to be able to resist in case of any aggression in the northern part of India. India will look at Japan to support its cause and make the world understand why we have been resistant towards addressing Russia as an aggressor. India's partnership with Japan will sail on its engagements that has already been taken forward in various bilateral forums, whether it is economic, critical technologies, vaccine diplomacy, etc. But I think right now what it is important is for them to look beyond the bilateral and help that India would need from Japan to be able to engage within the ASEAN community is where I think India would position itself in the current framework that has been created because of the Ukraine crisis. The Ukraine crisis is new. Ukraine's crisis is unsettling. Ukraine crisis moves the axis of the world engagement, because if USA is to focus more on the Ukraine crisis, it would create a vacuum in the Asian region. How we as middle powers come together to keep a balancing act and enable to engage China more productively would be what we would be looking at in future. It is an interesting time. It is an interesting debate. I look forward to much more engagement, and we look forward to your. So thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Morning. Thank you very much. Our next guest speaker is Dr. Corey. Are you with us, Dr. Corey, this morning?
Yes.
Okay.
I am here. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now is your 15 minutes.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Right here. Let me just share my screen.
Saya nggak pernah suka PowerPoint. Saya paling nggak suka pakai PowerPoint.
Iya, karena kita perlu pakai PowerPoint atau teks yang kita siapin itu. Nih, udah.
Okay. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. You can hear me. It's all good.
Good.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. So my name is Corey Wallace. I'm originally from New Zealand, but I'm currently at Kanagawa University in Yokohama, Japan. And my main area of interest is Japanese security policy, geopolitics, and so forth. So today I want to talk to you about Japan within great power competition, with the extra, I guess you could say, spice added by these recent events, which have had some reasonably interesting impacts in Japan, including Japan making some moves that people are quite surprised about. So anyway, let's start with talking about Japan's sort of strategic positioning within great power competition. I mean, Japan itself, I mean, there are, you know, like for example, former Prime Minister Abe wanted to make Japan a so-called top-tier power again, but for the most part, Japan's in a global sense no longer, or hasn't been for a while, a great power. But it's still a very strong regional power. And so for about 20 years after the Cold War, Japan adopted what Professor Samuels at MIT called a dual hedge. So what do I mean by dual hedge? Well, basically Japan could offset the potential for cooperation in one domain where, you know, one of the great powers could wield its influence and leverage for maybe even exploiting Japan by relying on the other. So, for example, it was an attempt by Japan to, for example, prevent the US using its security relationship to exploit Japan too much economically, and vice versa, allow Japan to offset China's ability to exploit its economic power to exploit Japan in the security domain. Okay, so in the security area, it remained reliant on the US through security by providing bases, but also through some limited cooperation. For example, we saw things like special measures legislation where Japan sent troops to Iraq and to the Indian Ocean, non-combat troops, of course. And there were also other areas of cooperation, such as ballistic missile defense. On the economic side of things, Japan doubled down on the China relationship, particularly the trade and investment, supported China to join the WTO, APEC. And by the early 2000s, China was actually an important driver of Japan's economic recovery after the bursting of the bubble in the early 90s, and then the problems introduced by the Southeast Asia Korea financial crisis. So anyway, that was how things were looking around about 2010 for the first 20 years after the Cold War. But since 2010, things have changed quite considerably. So on the security side of things, obviously we've seen the US partnership be considerably enhanced. And so Japan's doubled down on the US partnership, the US-Japan alliance. So we saw things like the 2015 peace and security legislation, and this allowed Japan to exercise what is called a limited degree of collective self-defense. So if there was a big conflict in East Asia, for example, around the Korean Peninsula or Taiwan, and maybe the South China Sea, Japan could cooperate more than before with the United States. Perhaps not on the front line, but it could provide much bolder military support than before. So there's also been lots of other cooperation pursued through, say, the outer space area, cybersecurity, intelligence sharing, etc. On the security leg, Japan has also tried to diversify its security relationships. So I won't go into it because you're probably all very aware of the relationships with Australia and India. Japan has improved. We have the Quad relationship. We see the maritime Southeast Asia outreach, particularly to Japan showed a lot more interest in the security domain with Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia. Both what you would call Coast Guard security, as well as even some traditional military cooperation. And we've even seen quite a lot of engagement with Europe and other Five Eyes partners, such as the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, France, and so forth. So these developments are all part of this sort of enhancement of the military security side of the dual hedge, if we can even call it a hedge anymore. Here we go, sorry. Now, on the economic side of things, well, there's been a much more sort of diversification here too, particularly away from over-reliance on China. Especially following the 2008 global financial crisis, Japan discovered that it had become incredibly dependent on China, not only as a market for its exports, but even its production capacity, technological development. A lot of it was centered in China increasingly. So this was a significant cause for concern. So the alternatives here have been a greater focus on what we call Mekong capacity building. So there's a new relationships in the form of Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, connecting through the older relationship with Thailand in the Mekong. But there's also been a recommitment to infrastructure development, and some would say competition with China in particular, in Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia. So we've seen lots of extra diplomatic effort being invested in these relationships by Japan. And the basic idea here is that Japan has its own interests, obviously, and one of those interests is to perhaps help Southeast Asia to help itself more than before. And what do I mean by that? Well, perhaps to a certain degree, there was some arrogance there before, where there was an idea where Southeast Asia was in a sort of vertical hierarchical relationship with Northeast Asia. But what had happened over time is that clearly meant that as Japan became more dependent on China, and Korea dependent on China, and Southeast Asia on China, well, this was not necessarily seen as a good sort of state of, a good sort of balance, economic balance to be sustained over the longer term. And so if Japan could not only pursue its own interests through its infrastructure, exports and so forth, but at the same time help countries in Southeast Asia, also India, and increasingly, as we'll see with the Indo-Pacific concept, Eastern Africa, if they can use their own resources, their own great natural resources, their own human resources, for themselves and to derive their own economic development, that may be a better outcome than everyone increasing their reliance on the Chinese market and production networks. Of course, you can never exclude them. They're still going to remain important, but you can decrease the degree of reliance. And so this is one reason why we've seen Japan promote this so-called horizontal conception of the Indo-Pacific. And the idea here is that instead of sort of vertical hierarchical connectivity between Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia, what we're seeing is increased Japanese support for efforts by ASEAN, by India, and so forth to connect not only within, say, ASEAN or the Mekong, within the Bay of Bengal area, within East Africa, but connect these sub-regions to each other. So I think we're seeing a lot more, not only investment and trade interest in these areas, but Japan's even dedicating more ODA resources and to support the development of so-called quality infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, on the economic security area, right now, the Japanese parliament is deliberating some new legislation. And the idea here is more inward facing, but basically there's seen to be a greater need by Japan to protect its own technology and intellectual capital, patents, licensing, et cetera. It wants to ensure its own high-tech edge, or at least not getting behind China in some of these new technological areas, the so-called game-changing fourth industrial revolution technologies. And in particular, Japan wants to make sure it doesn't fall behind in some of the technologies with major defense implications, because it may well need to engage on a much more robust defense buildup in the future. Right now, Japan is increasing its defense spending a little bit, but it's really not that impressive, to be honest, despite what you might read in the media. So, what has this meant for China and Japan? Well, we all know that there's been strategic competition within East Asia. There's been territorial tensions around the Senkaku Islands. We know that the Abe administration came in and took a tough line versus China, and this helped clear a path for security reforms like Japan's National Security Council, the collective self-defense legislation, changes to arms export restrictions, all sorts of things. But then suddenly around 2018, the Abe administration adopted a lighter tone with China. And this, for some degree, was to stabilize Japan's relations with China. The idea here was that Japan had strengthened the relationship with the United States. The next point of order was to stabilize relations with China after a tough few years. This would, as Abe's own administration was getting, perhaps he was thinking about his legacy. Having Xi Jinping come to Japan around the time of the Olympics as a state visit could be a good thing. And even on ODA, while in 2018, Japan stopped bilateral ODA to China, a lot of people sort of, at that time, missed the idea was it wasn't the end of the relationship of ODA, but rather China no longer needed it anymore, for obvious reasons. But there was a potential for Japan and China to cooperate in so-called third countries, i.e., particularly in the Mekong area, in sort of infrastructure deployment and development and so forth. So this was the kind of situation around about the start of 2020, right? China-Japan relations, you could say, were on a slightly upward trajectory after many tough years. Next slide. Here we go. Now, on Russia, Abe was quite interesting because he actually saw that he had a historical role. He would stabilize relations with the US. After that, he would do it with China. and then building on his father's legacy, perhaps with Russia too. So obviously there's the Northern Territories dispute, and Abe sort of perceived himself as having an ability to negotiate with tough men or hard men like Putin and so forth. As it's turned out, nobody can do that, it seems, but at the time, Abe was quite optimistic that he could do that. But then there was also an economic cooperation agenda, and there was energy as well as geopolitical elements to that. So when I say energy, obviously with the nuclear drawdown after the 2011 triple disaster in Japan, the access to energy, in particular in Russia's gas resources, was seen as an important thing for Japan. But its economic cooperation with Russia was seen even more broadly because there was a danger of China potentially exerting quite a significant amount of influence over the Eastern Russian areas, there's Siberia and so forth. If you look at the border between Russia and China there, on the Chinese side, there's a huge amounts of development, majorly big cities. On the Russian side of the border, there's much less. And so there was some sort of concern there that both infrastructure and even maybe human capital, migration, etc., through these things and China's sort of presence there, that might lead to unwanted geopolitical outcomes down the track. And finally, particularly Abe, but there's a number of conservatives in Japan who've always had these continental balance of power considerations in their mind. And when we go back to the Meiji era, we see with Imperial Russia, Japan was extremely concerned with their influence in northern China, in Korea, Manchuria, so forth. And to a certain degree, Russia, as much as European powers, drove Japan's sort of more aggressive behavior in the pre-war period towards continental Asia, especially as Japan perceived China and Korea not being strong enough themselves. But this even continued in the post-war period, especially after the Sino-Soviet split. Japan was very eager to, along with Nixon and so forth, to bring China into the Western side of things so that you would have China balancing the Soviet Union. And after the end of the Cold War, the situation is kind of flipped again. Abe, at least himself, identified the ability of Japan maybe using Russia to balance China in the long term. He thought that maybe the two powers, yes, they have the sort of communist kind of rhetoric sort of linking them in some history. They both are suspicious of the United States. But there was a belief that over the long term, the two countries actually had interests against cooperation. And so Abe wanted to be able to position Japan to take advantage of that. But throughout that whole time, a lot of Russia experts said that it's not possible, Mr. Abe. It's going to be, it's not quite that simple. And I think recent developments have sort of made that very clear. So to sort of tie this all together, we've seen some geopolitical shocks. We have COVID-19 in China. Now, this has been a sort of a double-edged thing. First of all, there is, especially in Japan and amongst even the Japanese public, there's been a strong sense that China was the cause of a lot of these, by being not transparent, it made the situation worse. But not only that, there's a sort of sense that, you know, China didn't have the so-called modesty to press pause on its strategic pursuits, and it's, you know, continued to be assertive. It's continued to undermine the international order from the point of view of people in Japan, at least anyway. You know, the South China Sea against Taiwan, and of course around the Senkaku Islands, there's been an even greater uptick in the presence of Chinese Coast Guard vessels, government vessels, new legislation that basically allows them to use weapons, which has caused great concern in Tokyo. there's also been internal Chinese developments, and if anything, as a third term of Xi Jinping looks inevitable, the tougher political control, the clampdown on not only Chinese people, but also foreign businesses on the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, on Hong Kong, has obviously turned the tide politically in Japan as well. And then there's Taiwan. And while people a lot of Japanese people blame China and for COVID-19 or for it getting out of control the way it did, Taiwan has, as a so-called vibrant democracy and friend of Japan, the only one that they really have in Northeast Asia, has started to become more prominent in Japanese discourse. And there's even debates in Japan about maybe Japan should commit to supporting Taiwan's security, like publicly. It's always been a sort of a quiet, silent kind of implication there, but there are political leaders now talking about Japan maybe being a explicit supporter of Taiwan's security and remaining independent. So as China looks to be bullying more Taiwan, there's actually greater sympathy for Taiwan and Japan. So anyway, but basically, if we take this all together, it's made it internally politically inadvisable for any Japanese leader to pursue a concessional approach to China right at this point in time. Add on to that the United States' own much more competitive strategy, Indo-Pacific turn. The need for Japanese alignment vis-a-vis China has only increased rather than decreased over the last few years. Now, with the other geopolitical shock of recent events, it's important to note that during the Abe administration, Europe and the United States were both very, very unsatisfied with Japan's response, both rhetorically, but also in terms of sanctions. But Ukraine in 2022 was even more shocking, but also very clarifying for Japan. And what this kind of did is sort of remove the last roadblocks of, I guess you could say, the sort of Abe line towards Russia. It wasn't really working anyway. Japan had gotten no concessions on northern territories. There was some economic cooperation, but Russia still held tight to China. It wasn't, breaking away in any way or form. But these recent events basically mean that Kishida, the current prime minister, doesn't have to pay as much sort of, I guess you could say, respect to the Abe line on Russia, which has been thoroughly delegitimated, I guess you could say. And so what has happened here is, along with public sentiment, which is very sympathetic towards Ukraine, even Japanese people are willing to take in larger numbers of Ukraine refugees, which for Japan is a new development. They also joined Western sanctions on SWIFT, Bank of Japan restrictions, and for Japan, at least, this was a big development. It said it would provide non-lethal military aid to Ukraine through Poland, who they've developed a new security relationship with. This is very new. Japan almost, or even, helmets or bulletproof vests would be a no-go for Japan during an ongoing military conflict. This time, they've basically loaded them on a plane and sent them off to Poland. So this is a very new thing. So we're going to see Japan change the language around Russia quite considerably, I think, in the national security strategy revision. So this will be the first revision since the original 2013 strategy. And the 2013 strategy is quite complimentary about the Russia partnership. But I feel this one will be a lot more bolder and more clarifying, I guess you could say, about strategic competition. So just some very quick lessons and issues for Japan going forward. I think what we're seeing here in the way that the international community has put pressure on Russia is that so-called economic warfare and economic tools can be very potent if used well. And for that reason alone, Japan needs to remain an economically powerful nation. Even if it doesn't potentially become quite as militarily powerful as some people maybe want or some people fear, if it maintains its economic capacity and economic and technological edges, it may still have some importance together with other nations in so-called economic warfare. Military lessons, I think regarding Taiwan, I think it shows two things. That look at the difficulty that Russia is having in Ukraine. Well, you have to times that by multiple times with Taiwan, because amphibious operations, even for militarily superior powers, are extraordinarily difficult. And sustaining a Chinese advance on Taiwan looks even more difficult in light of some of the Ukraine developments. And then add to that the economic costs that the international community can bring towards China, then perhaps recent events suggest that maybe Taiwan is not only worth fighting for, but can be, with the right kinds of cooperation and commitments, can be defended in some ways, better than perhaps people imagined. There's also another lesson, which for Japan is, yes, China is becoming more quantitatively powerful. And if you look at the defense spending and the defense unit numbers and you total them up, Japan looks in big trouble, even with the United States 7th Fleet there over the long term. But with proper investment in logistics and in resilience, Japan could actually remain in a position to keep fighting and to keep confounding any Chinese attack, at least initially. And this in itself adds to deterrence. Okay, so right now, Japan has a problem where it's got lots of, high-tech weapons platforms, but it lacks logistics, it lacks resilience, investments. There are concerns amongst the American military that Japan would fold in the first few days of any conflict because of these sort of limitations. But Ukraine has demonstrated that this is actually quite an important and very powerful investment that any military can make, even against a qualitatively superior threat. And then very lastly, we've got lots of questions. These are questions I have no answers to, but we've seen some big movements by Germany and Denmark towards increasing their defense spending. Will that increase pressure on Japan? That's something we can talk about a little bit later. While it reaffirms cooperation with the United States, Five Eyes, NATO, Europe, there is a slight concern about splitting Asia, perhaps, especially as we've already sort of spoken about India, Vietnam, and some other ASEAN nations are not quite with the West on alignment against Russia. And so this could lead to some difficult conversations over the few years. Although I would say, though, on the other hand, that Japan's own view on Russian involvement in Southeast Asia is what we would call nuanced. Because especially with Southeast Asia and India, if Russia provides the sort of, I guess you could say, the hard military power, then I guess that's something that Japan would not need to do itself because of the public restrictions against these sorts of geopolitical moves. So rather, Japan can perhaps provide the soft military infrastructure. So to give one example, Vietnam acquired Kido-class submarines, obviously developed in Russia originally, while Japan, on the other hand, started providing training and including medical training, but also just medical training for the use of submarines to Vietnam's military there. So Japan in itself is not necessarily against Russian involvement in Southeast Asia. So it kind of, to some degree, understands the reaction, even if it did wish Southeast Asia and also India would probably speak out a little bit stronger. But anyway, I'll leave that there for sort of issues to discuss going forward, and we could perhaps come back to that. So thank you very much. Sorry, it went a little bit long.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Corey, for your presentation. Okay, we are going to the next guest speaker, Dr. Johannes. Welcome, Dr. Johannes, your 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to give presentation to you all. And I think I just go straight to the to the presentation, to my presentation now. Well, first of all, when we are talking, this is kind of unexpected attack last month when Russia invaded Ukraine. And I mean, although lots of people are kind of thinking that that Putin was just bluffing at that time. I mean, nobody really thought that he was going to invade Ukraine. It was like unthinkable. But after he invaded Ukraine, I mean, then we can see here like there are something going on here. And basically, like we are trying to understand like what his motivation, like why did he decide to invade Ukraine? And what we see is that I think Putin here has two main goals. Aside of, well, I mean, first, as we all know, is he's trying to take over Ukraine back, or at least putting Ukraine back to the Russian orbit. But at the same time, but his second goal, which I think is also important, is that he wants to undermine the credibility of United States and NATO. And basically, nobody expected that United States and NATO to react this harshly. I mean, when Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2014, we didn't see this kind of reaction. I mean, like the Western sending weapons to Ukraine, which was like unthinkable, or like Professor Corey just now said, Japan suddenly sending humanitarian aids to Ukraine, or I mean, or like this economic boycott. And today, basically, Russia said that the ruble is no longer convertible because the economic boycott is just so devastating. I mean, the ruble is basically worthless nowadays. And so this is kind of unexpected. And one of the main reasons I think why the Western found their guts and decided to impose sanctions on Ukraine is the fact that Ukraine was managed to hold on the Russians. I mean, if the Ukraine fall, at which according to many experts, well, many experts believe that Ukraine would surrender in just 1 or 2 days, then it is not worth it to defend Ukraine. But suddenly now we are on the day 14, I think, 14 or 15, when after the invasion, and Ukraine was still standing, and that's basically forced the Western countries to basically to look closer to Russia and then think like, look what's going on here. I mean, why Russia is this incompetent? I mean, that's basically so I mean, but and running from that, then we have to look at the implication to Asia. Like, okay, so now we have all this fight in Ukraine. We saw this economic boycott to Russia, and also I mean all this, and of course the implication, the question that we have to ask now is what's the implication to Asia, especially to Southeast Asia, because I mean because in the future, I think, I mean, after this conflict is over, the next hotspot will remain Southeast Asia, basically, because it is strategically located between two oceans. It is strategically located in the, I mean, on the most important trade routes in the world, and basically China has a huge influence also to the region. So I think in the future, the invasion to Ukraine can be used as kind of model of what's will be going on here in Southeast Asia. But going back to my earlier assertion that that the West is that Russia thinks the West basically will not respond at all to its invasion to Ukraine. That's the same logic can also be seen to Asia. I mean, if Russia managed to take over Ukraine and the Western did not do anything, we can see the same thing going on here in Taiwan and also in Southeast Asia. So in the sense, like the West massive reaction to to Russia invasion is a little bit heartening in the sense that it's kind of giving the signal to to all other countries that relying on United States defense, such as Japan, such as Taiwan, and of course the Asian nation, that hey, maybe United States is going to help us later. But at the same time, the fact that NATO and United States didn't send any military units or impose no-fly zone also shows the limit. That by the end of the day, the West and NATO, well, United States and NATO, feared of triggering a nuclear war with Russia. I mean, if you impose a no-fly zone in Ukraine, that basically means that United States and NATO has the obligation to shut down any Russian air force that violating the no-fly zone. And that's kind of the fine line, which we don't know, like what's going to happen if we have that kind of situation going on. Is Putin going to see this as a NATO provocation and thus reacting with more invasions, such as to Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, which at this time is no longer credible, considering like how bad Russia performed in Ukraine? So if the conventional attack is no longer on the table due to Russian weaknesses, then the other option will be a limited nuclear war. When I say limited, it is because the Russian and United States has a doctrine that there are two types of nuclear war. The first is tactical nukes. It is basically we are using like a small bomb, just like 20 times the strength of the bomb that hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it is a small bomb. It is not the huge ICBM bomb that will destroy everything. Basically, it is a small bomb, just 20 times the strength of Hiroshima. So I mean, and then they are using it for tactical nukes. I mean, for the battlefield. And that's the fear. But the question is, of course, like what's the difference between tactical nukes like that and the strategic nukes, which basically an ICBM? And that's the fine line that NATO doesn't want to really ask, because nobody really, because we haven't experienced any nuclear war yet, and hopefully not, never, hopefully. But so now everything is only based on scenario, on game theory. We are try to kind of make a prediction like, okay, what's going on? What will happen? And basically the use of tactical nuke is not something that we really want to try. We really want to experiment on. So that's one of the main reasons why NATO and United States didn't want to use military forces to defend Ukraine, even though there are a lot of pressures nowadays to just send military units to Ukraine to fight the Russians. And that's the same thing in Japan and in Taiwan and in Southeast Asia. Okay, if push comes to shove, if China decided that they need to invade Taiwan, is the United States willing to defend Taiwan on the expense of, let's say, a nuclear bomb explode in Seattle or in San Francisco or Los Angeles? That's the thing that maybe that's the kind of question being to question. I mean, for the past 30 years since the end of the Cold War, people are all saying that, war is no longer thinkable. Nuclear war is no longer thinkable. Yeah, there are still wars, of course, but among all great powers, among all superpowers, United States, European countries, and Russia and China, I mean, war is no longer thinkable. But now the fact that Russia is invading Ukraine makes us have to rethink all this perception. I mean, I know I'm talking something that's very, very controversial here, and I know, I mean, there will be like lots of people pushing back. Like, I mean, are you kind of doomsayer thing? I mean, is it kind of like too far? I mean, are you going too far? But those are the scenarios that are currently we are trying to consider. And and at that time, and at this point, and until Russia invaded Ukraine, the argument, the belief is that Russia will not, or China will not try to invade other countries blatantly. I mean, they will make a quick attack like what they did in 2014. They mean taking over Crimea and Donetsk I mean, all those is a part of Ukraine, and that's all. And that's the limited. That's the limit of the ambition. But now, after Putin invaded Poland, and then Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, show a map where the Russian army are going to Moldova, then all bet is off, basically. There are no questions like how much those countries are willing to attack. I mean, are they trying to just change the international system peacefully or militarily? And the same, and that's also bring the question of like how much United States is committed to defend its interest in Southeast Asia and in Taiwan, another place in Southeast Asia. Of course, I'm now giving you all the doomsday scenario, and I mean, but what I'm thinking now is like we have have three scenarios going on here. First scenario is if Russia wins, despite all the sanctions, despite all the help to Ukraine, Russia still wins. What's going on? What will happen? And the second scenario is okay. So Russia wins, but they basically say, okay, we only want a limited gain now. We got blooded badly by Ukrainians. I mean, our tanks were stolen by Ukrainian farmers. I mean, basically we messed up badly, so it is a Pyrrhic victory. So we stop. And the third scenario is what if Russia lose the war? If Russia wins, basically the entire credibility of United States and NATO is shot, basically. Because for countries in Southeast Asia or in South or East Asia, basically they are saying that, look, United States may keep saying that, oh, we are defending Ukraine or whatever, but they lost. They allow Russia to win. So in that case, then I think what we will see here in Southeast Asia is more arms race, because we can no longer rely on the United States. Basically, I mean, that's what the thing that I also keep hearing, like, Ukraine is stupid. Why? Because they were fighting alone. They keep saying that they want to join NATO, but NATO didn't help them. So they keep provoking Russia and they got hit, and NATO basically sit pretty, don't help them at all. And if that's the case, then, and like I said, I mean, we will see a massive arms race in Southeast Asia, because we can no longer rely on the United States to help us defending against China, whatever. Or China will become more belligerent, thinking that, okay, United States is not going to defend them anyway. And what we'll see is, is basically more China growing power in Southeast Asia, which is also kind of bad. The second option, the second scenario, that I told you, like limited win. I think that is the best out of possible world. The best out of possible world, in the sense like, okay, Russia wins, but they stop their ambition, and they're basically kind of showing this country in Southeast Asia, in Taiwan, like, okay, as long as we are willing to fight, we are going to get help, and the help will be enough to keep us alive. And China is not stupid. They are looking at this. They are watching what's going on in Ukraine, and they look at what the United States and West react, and in order to make their own scenario of like what they are going to do in Taiwan. The third scenario is if Russia lost badly, we will see a new alignment. Basically, Russia will try to become closer to China. Russia will actually become a subordinate of China, because they basically just terrible. Their economy is in a mess. They lost all their military power. So in order to survive, they have to align themselves with China and in a subordinate position. In this case, we may see a new alignment. Basically, China, Russia, and United States, NATO, and this, in my opinion, will make the world a little bit scarier. this is will be better in the case of Russia win, but you know, but again, I mean, this is not something good. So, like it or not, the Russian invasion to Ukraine has a very strong impact on Asia, especially on how we will fight to, I mean, how the security arrangement will be done in the next future. And already, I mean, we can see the response. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I'm right, I mean, Corey can correct me on this. But a couple of days ago, the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, basically said that openly, say that, oh, you know, maybe Japan should get a nuke. Of course, the current Prime Minister saying that no, he's out of line. But the fact that it is shown, it is said openly, it becomes a normal discourse in Japan, shows like how important this, I mean, the Russian attack Ukraine is in changing the mindset, the view of people here, the security people. And the question is, what will Indonesia do? I mean, so far we keep saying that we want to play safe, okay? We don't like United States. I mean, well, we like United States, but not that much because we're afraid that they will put embargo on us. Maybe due to West Papua or whatever, to human rights or anything. I mean, they will basically put them, and there's always a risk of them putting embargo. And if they put an embargo, then we have to look at another source, and this time it's Russia. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why we don't criticize Russian invasion. But at the same time, I mean, with this, I mean, the entire with what we think normal is changing, then my fear is maybe we need to start rethinking of what our security position is. Okay, anyway, I think that's all. I mean, I think I already on like hitting the 15 minutes mark, so I think I will close my presentation today. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman. Okay, before we are going to the question and answer session, I would like to welcome sorry. Okay, I would like to welcome Dr. Anthony. Huh? Doctor from Canada.
Anthony Nove.
Okay, I would like to welcome the Honorable Anthony Nove from Canada Consulate. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
The embassy.
Okay, I believe that there are a lot of questions come into your mind concerning the idea that has presented by our guest speakers this morning. I have a bit worry because today we have about 337 participants, and if every single participant send their questions, then I believe that we have no much time to answer all the questions. But let me focus on the idea that we need to discuss this morning. As our topic this morning is a United States-China rivalry in Asia and aftermath of Russia's invasion on Ukraine. There are a lot of ideas that we can explore together. The first one is what are the impacts of the competition between two superpower countries, China and United States in Asia. And at the same time, we are really aware we have in Asia the middle power countries, India and also Japan. And let us talk about these both countries' roles in the competition between China and United States in Asia. At the same time, if we look into the idea that had been shared by Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman, at the same time, we have a global crisis, something that happened in Ukraine when Russia sent their troops into Ukraine. So the question is, what are the nexus between crisis that happened in Ukraine with the competition between China and United States in Asia? As Dr. Johannes explained, there are some implications of the crisis in Ukraine and its implies to the Asia situation, especially when we talk about Indo-Pacific and ASEAN countries. Okay, we will have about 15 and 20 minutes ahead for the question and answer. If you would like to raise your hand and give your question immediately to the speaker, you can raise your hand. And if you want to send message, you are welcome for your question in the room chat. Okay, let us start with the first question. Okay,
yes,
welcome Rizal Yusuf, Mr. Rizal Yusuf, welcome.
Mr. Khairul.
Thank you for the opportunity.
iPhone itu tadi dia ngangkat tangan itu tangan begini bukan tangan pakai itu.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Rizal Yusuf. I'm an army by profession. I have a question for the two speaker. Before that, thank you for the remarkable presentation. Historically speaking, or based on history, China was a victim for 1,000 years, which is they are invited by Japan. We know Nanjing massacre. And, according to the research or the white book from China Defense Department, they say that they will not seek a hegemony, but they defend themselves. One thing that China ever invited is when they invited Vietnam for 6 months. So from my point of view, China is not seek a hegemony. And my question is, what should ASEAN country did, in particular my country, Indonesia, because our former president said that one enemy is too much.
Oh, ini kenapa?
Dari dianya. Bilang aja Pak.
Okay, Mr. Rizal, sorry we cannot hear you. Okay, I'm going to the next question. Putri Aulia.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to say thank you very much. It's such an amazing opportunity to have a lot of interesting topics and insights throughout this webinar. And because last research that I've had is also regarding on the US and China rivalry in the Indo-Pacific from Indonesian perspective. Well, my name is Putra Aulia, and I am a Magister of International Relations student in University of Jenderal Ahmad Yani. And the question that I would like to ask closely related with the main cause of our topic for today, which it was the rivalry between Russia and Ukraine, but mainly focus on the response that comes from other countries, especially from Indo-Pacific countries. In your opinion, despite on everything that happens between Russia and Ukraine, what factors that matters the most in the management of this conflict? Is it possible for both of them to reach out a resolution with an equal agreement? Or the conflict clearly needs another Indo-Pacific countries to intercede between both of them, since this issue have several impacts towards surrounding countries? And because we do understand that, for example, India, Japan, or maybe like we can say Indonesia, is also not only supporting the value of peace and prosperity, but also the value of neutrality in the region? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Dr. Johannes, you need to give answer for the question.
Sebenarnya mendingan tanya dulu si Sabani sama si Kobi dulu itu enggak ya, apalagi si Brandi dari tadi udah lama nggak ngomong gitu.
Oh, okay. Or Professor Srabani and Dr. Corey, would you like to give your perspective on these questions? Okay, we start from Professor Srabani or Dr. Corey.
Either's fine.
Oh, okay, come.
Okay. So, so in terms of how the Indo-Pacific sort of views recent events, so I think we can split this up into two kind of categories. I think where we don't want to make too many direct connections relates to the actors involved. Okay, so if we think about the Taiwan situation, I think China, of course, is very interested in the reunification of Taiwan and all of that, but China is also a much more cautious actor, I think, than Russia is, at least under Putin in recent years. You put that against the environment that Putin is operating in, where, you know, I mean, Ukraine itself was, you know, still in a process of sort of standing itself up after the Cold War and after independence, and Europe, as we've seen, kind of let its guard down. Putin, being a more assertive actor, had an opportunity there to do what he did. While in East Asia, we have China, which I think is more cautious, even if it is ambitious. We have the United States in Japan, providing that sort of balance. And countries in the area are suspicious of China in a way that, you know, Germany was not until very recently. Of course, Germany changed its tune almost overnight. So I think from that point of view, I think we probably have to be a bit careful. But what I would say in terms of what is important are the lessons learned. And I sort of talked about a little bit that near the end. And I think there are sort of military lessons about why, you know, preparing to be able to, you know, by making resilience investments so that your military can continue to operate even after an initial attack, having good logistics lines, essentially not only having strong looking hardware, but also having good training, making sure your military is committed and disciplined, and all of these sorts of things has a lot of value. Just because one power has a lot of stuff and, you know, looks like it has air superiority and looks like it has an overwhelming amount of force doesn't dictate anything necessarily. So that's one lesson that we should take away from this. And I think strategically is the ability to impose costs, both military costs, as Ukraine is doing, and other countries are supporting it to doing so without getting directly involved, but also the ability to impose economic costs as well. And if countries in the Indo-Pacific realize this, then they may not necessarily have to match China, you know, submarine for submarine, or, you know, aircraft, the numbers of aircraft that they're putting out into the field, and all these other things that China has superiority in, at least in numbers anyway. So for me, I think, you know, there's a lot, the middle powers and regional powers like Indonesia, Japan, you know, my own country, New Zealand, Canada, all these countries have a role to play, I think, in sort of creating in a sort of an environment that can, if needed, impose these kinds of costs on incautious action, which could happen sometime in the future. So that's my point of view on that. But good question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Corey. Professor Srabani, your idea
Yeah, thank you. The question is interesting, and I think it will consume IR relations for a couple of years to come. See, from an Indian point of view, I think why India is being questioned with respect to, I see another question also, which I think will get answered in this itself, that, you know, why India abstained from General Assembly voting. The reason why this question is obviously framed for us in India to answer is because India advocates democracy. India advocates liberal order and rule-based functioning. And according to the situation that one sees between Russia and Ukraine, all these three things seems to have got marginalized. And therefore, why India has abstained is become a question. India's abstinence is obviously related to its own national interest. We already, as I said in my presentation, we already have China and Pakistan. And since Russia seems to be also today aligning with China, we would fear an alignment which would encircle India. Historically, of course, Russia has been a great friend of India. We have huge support from India, from Russia during the Bangladesh crisis. We also significantly have defense equipments procured from Russia. So all this obviously entangles India's, coming up upfront in addressing this crisis and, pushing Russia to this. But as I think I will go with Corey by saying that in case of Indo-Pacific, obviously the Ukraine crisis often is being related to whether China will follow it in Taiwan, and therefore the question of how will we as Indo-Pacific region react to it. As such, matching China for arms to arms is not possible. It's for India, definitely, it's something that has upfront been now questioned, that India should increase its own military capability, because that is the only way. You can't hope for support. You need to be yourself, strengthen your own military capabilities. But then the fear that India has is once you get into this race, and that is exactly what we try to avoid post Second World War, is to not get into this race of military armament. And for India, it will be a huge cost because our economy needed to be put in place, and we were already tugging it and chugging the whole process. So for India, having a peace in Indo-Pacific region means a lot. We have certain capabilities within this region in maritime, with respect to maritime security concerns, but we definitely need to align ourselves and be more engaged with the ASEAN countries as well as Japan and other liberal order regimes to be able to create an atmosphere of deterrence, maybe, to the rising power of China. I think the entire exercise probably will move in this direction. Of course, this is my calculation at this point of time. Thank you.
Sravani.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Johannes, do you have any idea?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond. And so what's the lesson learned from this entire crisis? I mean, Corey already said that you may better strengthen your logistics and make sure the farmers not going to steal your tanks. I guess that's kind of the easy answer for now. But in the long run, I think the biggest lesson that countries here in Southeast Asia learned is that they have to show their resilience first. I mean, if they want to get any help from the West, I mean, if Ukraine just surrender in 2 days, I don't think we are going to have this kind of discussion. People will already say, oh, it's already a week, who cares? And and Russia will take over Ukraine. But the fact that the United States rightly trained the capability of the Ukrainian army instead of just sending them lots of nice shiny hardware, is kind of showing their their use now. They are that despite of their of their weak weaponry. I mean, they managed to hold the Russian for two weeks, and at this point, Russia was showing that they are basically terrible in war. I mean, in winter war, which is kind of outstanding. I mean, compared to, I mean, if we think the fact that Germany was lost, I mean, one of the main reasons why Germany lost in the Second World War was because the Russian winters, and now Russia lost due to the winter. I mean, that's kind of it is a kind of a really nice, delicious irony in my view. But I mean, so that's the first thing that you have to learn. I mean, basically resilience. Resilience is important. I mean, like Corey said, I mean, we don't really need to get as we can as many new weapons, shiny weapons to balance China, but just increase your your ability to fight, and make sure that you give any attacker a bloody nose. Then people will start helping you. I mean, that's I think one of the main lesson. But closer to home, I think the main one here, I think the lesson for ASEAN itself is that maybe we need to rethink of our entire arrangement. I mean, if you look at what all 10 nations of ASEAN are saying, I mean, Singapore basically saying that, yeah, we are going to impose sanctions on Russia now because we are supporting Ukraine. Why? Because if you look at Singapore, it is the smallest state in Southeast Asia. It was bordered by two giants. I mean, one in Indonesia and the other one is Malaysia. It is basically Singapore. The only thing that can save Singapore is that, I mean, a set of their weaponry is that everybody is following international norms, which is basically saying like attacking other countries is against the norm, and that's why Singapore was the first country in Southeast Asia that said no, we are not going to tolerate Russia, because if Russia was allowed to take over Ukraine, I mean, there will be like a possibility that some crazy people either in Malaysia or Indonesia is going to say, "Hey, let's take Singapore next." I mean, which is kind of bad for them. That's one of the main reasons for Singapore to just side with Ukraine, because they just sympathize. But I mean, if you and of course Myanmar and Cambodia and Laos, they kind of had their bet. They kind of saying that, oh, I mean, we need to think about like what Russia think. But the rest of Southeast Asia, like Indonesia, like I mean, we are hedging. So and while we are supporting, criticizing Russia in the General Assembly, but the fact is clear that when we first asked whether we should criticize them, we just send them the statement of concerns rather than openly saying that no, we are against it. And I think it is kind of the same logic with what India is doing. I mean, like Professor Sabrani said, I mean, India was afraid if they condemn Russia, that means that they will be surrounded by enemies. I mean, Russia, Pakistan, and China. And in Indonesia case, I think that's kind of on one security problem, because we have our we have our hegemonic denial strategy. We don't want any great power to be to be too strong in the region. So if we say that we are going to condemn Russia, we basically telling United States, we are basically saying that the influence United States and United States and China is growing in the region, and that's the thing that we don't want to. So it is also still based on what we think is going on, and what strategy is. So but in short term, again, I mean, I'm going to concur with Corey. I mean, the lesson is just make sure your army can fight when somebody comes, basically, and make sure you don't insult farmers.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Johannes. I think there is a questions that address specific to Dr. Johannes Sulaiman. I need to read the question first. Okay, good morning, sir. We know that Russia must have considered very careful when deciding to demilitarize Ukraine. Please explain whether this will be the seed for further wars. Then how should Indonesia act in this regard, considering the risk to the security of Indonesia territory? Thank you very much. Your question.
Well, I'm not sure. What's the question is basically? Is it mean that like what we need to do to prevent the future war, or I mean, so in the sense like we want to prevent other wars happening, or what, or we want to prevent somebody others to attack us. I mean, I'm not sure. So what I mean, what's the purpose of the question here? If the question's goal is to saying that, I mean, what we should do so nobody's going to invade Indonesia. Well, basically, I'm going to quote Jeffrey Blaney on this. I mean, war happens because these two sides decides that they prefer to go to war than not, basically. If one of the sides say that, oh, we are not going to war, they will capitulate or just send diplomats to give them concessions. But in this case, well, both Ukraine and Russia thinks that they are going to win. I mean, so in this case, basically, Indonesia has to improve its deterrence. Basically, so, I mean, that's basically the answer. Maybe we have to increase our deterrence capability, basically by buying more buying more submarines or more planes. But of course, I mean. So that's the question. If you just want to say like how to prevent security, invasion, basically. But so basically just there's no other. And again, we can of course the usual answer is like just focus on diplomacy. But at this time, the goal of the army is to prevent the worst case scenario. And so that's all I can say. I guess just increase our deterrence capability.
Okay, we're going to the next question. I believe that we have one more question from Mr. Kevin, Universitas Paramadina. The question is, how far will the lukewarm condemnation of Russia by certain countries in the Pacific area serve as an encouragement to China to follow Russia's lead in taking direct military action to further its political claims in the area? Okay, who wants to start with this question? Professor Srabani, could you please?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very difficult question to answer because we know that there are two strong narratives that is emerging. One narrative is that China is waiting to see how Russia is contained in Ukraine crisis and therefore would make its claims. The other narrative that has consumed is that China is also realizing the kind of economic sanctions that is being put in place by the Western order, as well as pushed by the Western orders to other countries to follow those sanctions, which would definitely cause alarms for Russia. And in turn, if China was going to face such economic sanctions, how far can China sustain itself beyond the economic sanctions? Given these two ways of viewing this particular issue, this futuristic claim of whether China can make a political claim, especially when we say this, it means essentially first looking at whether China would take an aggressive stance towards Taiwan, considering it historically says that it has larger claim on it than probably what Russia has over Ukraine. My understanding of this is that it's a wait and watch. China is much more, assertive in creating incursions, which has been testing waters with respect to South China Sea, East China Sea, as well as Sea of Japan. If we go by what has happened in 2020, in spite of the pandemic and the kind of incursions that China has had, the amount of ships that has encircled these regions, fear always remains that China might step up its activity. From an Indian point of view, we obviously are following this very closely because it will be affecting us on our back doors, and we would be definitely challenged by this entire aggressive approach of China. However, given the fact that what is also being strongly narrated, that war doesn't usually lead to any good, if we assume that such goodwill will exist among nations, we can probably see China being much more defensive over going forward with any stronger assertions. This is what is the third alternative that one can talk about. As far as India goes, we are not ruling out that China might get aggressive in its stance. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Corey.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that sort of take. I mean, China is assertive, but it's also a much more deliberate actor, I think. And so it is testing the waters where it thinks it can get away with things, but I don't think it's necessarily, especially considering countries aren't pushing back too hardly, going over the top at this point in time. So I'm not necessarily sure that they will become more assertive as such in the maritime domain. Diplomatically, there may be, I could see China perhaps creating a narrative, because if you look at what's happening here is that, yes, there is some lukewarm diplomacy by some actors in the Indo-Pacific, but there's also some surprisingly robust diplomacy by some other actors in the Indo-Pacific. So it depends on what China wants to see there. And perhaps in the long term, it could play up those differences. Maybe, with all of the Indo-Pacific rhetoric and the Quad Plus sort of cooperation, maybe it could try and exacerbate a divide between those powers that are taking a strong stance on Russia and those that have not. But I think that's just something we need to be mindful of. And you look at one side of the countries that are a little bit more cautious on condemning China, and then you look at those that are like you've got the United States, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Japan, Taiwan, Republic of Korea, France, UK, Germany from outside. They're all pretty strong economies, and they're able to impose considerable economic costs. So I think the lesson there that could be taken either which way, including should be taken by maybe a lot of countries in the area, is that economic power is also extremely important. And if you want to have diplomatic influence, then you should also be very careful in making sure that you have also underpin your industrial base as well as your defense base and all of these sorts of things. So there's a very roundabout answer there. Basically, I think the answer to that is wait and see, to see how the conflict turns out and how diplomacy unfolds over the next few years.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Corey. Dr. Johannes, do you have any idea?
Yeah, well, a bit basically. I mean, I already mentioned this earlier, but one of the main reasons why the reaction was lukewarm for most countries is that nobody thought Ukraine could last as long as this. I mean, remember, when when Russia first invaded Ukraine, then they were like people start saying that where's your condemnation? I mean, and in Indonesia case, we just didn't give any condemnation. We just say statement of concern and sent it with India and well, but so I mean but after Ukraine was managed to resist Russia, then they're starting to get more condemnation, and I think that's what China's learned basically. I mean, if they think that they can win easily, then they should do it, because if they are looking for a long war, I mean, sooner or later the world opinion will be against them. But again, I want to emphasize that China and Russia is way different. I mean, like Corey said, China is more cautious, but at the same time, China is also the second largest economy in the world. meaning that it is far more difficult to boycott China than to boycott Russia. And in one sense, I think China can be less worried of getting boycott compared to Russia. I mean, even now, after United States and European Union boycott Russia, we see that the price of the nickel just goes skyrocket. The price of the oil just skyrocketed. And you can imagine like what will happen when we start boycotting China. I think that's one of the main reasons why one main difference here. And of course by saying so the question is whether staying lukewarm it will be problematic. I mean, I think in short run, no, I don't think so. But in long run, perhaps it's kind of. I think this kind of show. It's kind of reinforcing the lesson from Ukraine. If Russia, if China can win fast, then they're going to do it. If they think that it's going to, to long war, then they are not. Then they are not going to cause a problem. And as a result, I think the lesson the lesson for Southeast Asian countries should be like is getting more hardware, strengthening their military in order to make sure that if China wants to hit us, then they have to prepare for a long war, basically.
Okay. Thank you. I just received more 2 questions. The question is addressed to Professor Srabani. The short question, Professor.
Yeah.
The question from our students. Okay. Professor Srabani, where's China position on the conflict situation between Russia and Ukraine today? Could you give your response to our student question, please?
Yeah, thank you. It's simply well known now that China has made its own small nuances of accepting that what Russia has done is not right. But however, it is definitely throwing its weight with Russia right now. So it's not, I think throwing weight would be too strong a statement, but it is definitely aligning itself. And the fear is today's current fear in the liberal order is if Russia and China were to come together. And that's why I raised that question of whether it will lead to a new Cold War situation. I think that simply puts what the question that you've asked in with respect to the Ukraine crisis. Is it a fight between a liberal world and a different ideological background? I don't think it is still becoming an ideological background. It is rather a nuanced approach of countries wanting to be protecting its own national interest. At the moment, I think it doesn't take the ideological background, which was what the Cold War was all about. I think this should answer your question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. Actually, we have no much time, but there are a lot of questions come into my gadget, so I need to select about one more question. Okay, the question is from students. Okay, what is the impact of AUKUS to Indonesia country, since China Coast Guard always enter to our line in Natuna? I think this is a special question because not connecting immediately to our topic this morning. But if you want to give your response to our student question, you are welcome. Maybe Dr. Corey, do you have any idea?
Sure. So, yeah, just looking at the question here, there's a few questions on AUKUS. I mean, I understand there is a lot of interest in Indonesia about AUKUS. So I'll say, so one person mentioned about New Zealand and AUKUS. I thought that was quite interesting. A lot of people have pointed that out, but let's be honest, even when Australia has it's conventionally powered submarines. They never visit New Zealand anyway. So New Zealand doesn't really have the infrastructure to support submarines. So I don't think it's a big deal that New Zealand will ban nuclear submarines from the water. But I do think the AUKUS agreement overall, from a water point of view, is an interesting one. But I think we just have to, before we think about what the implications of AUKUS are for Indonesia and other countries, we have to see what AUKUS is going to be, because there's a lot of, skepticism that it can even deliver on what it say is going to do, whether Australia will get nuclear powered submarines at all, whether it will be able to set up the infrastructure to do so, whether the United States will share Tomahawk cruise missiles and various other onboard combat systems and so forth. So my suggestion for those concerned about AUKUS or interested in it is to just wait and see what exactly is going to happen on it in the first place. It's very ambitious, but a lot of the details are not filled in yet. Yeah, so that would be my advice about that arrangement.
We have more time because I just talked to the committee. We can answer more questions. I need to return to our first question. Mr. Rizal Yusuf, are you here?
Yes, I'm so sorry because I lost my connection.
Okay, welcome back.
I have a question to Dr. Corey Wallace. What do you think about anti-access strategy? Because Indonesia as an archipelagic country that vis-a-vis same with Japan, it means that we didn't allow any enemy or any war happen in our country. It is possible to Indonesia stand alone with the anti-access strategy. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, so anti-access strategies are all the rage to invest in. And I think there's two sort of elements there. There is not only about having, each country needs to think about investing in its own anti-access strategy for raising, to a certain degree, the costs of small-scale action. Obviously, they're not going to be able to resist individually a full-scale assault by China, but if they can raise the costs in the short term from opportunistic actions, or to make it more difficult for China, for example, to win decisively and early, then they have some value. I think they're a very good investment. So that's one aspect. The other aspect too is that you almost need a anti-access strategy as well. And what I mean by that is you need to invest in resources that allows others to come to your help. So you yourself need to be able to show resilience at the outset and, you know, don't fold in the first few days of a conflict as Ukraine is showing. But you also need to make investments that will allow other countries that may want to help you, whether it be the United States or Australia or whoever also has a strong military, to come and operate as well. And so that's something, for example, in the Japan situation, they've had to be very mindful of, because at the end of the day, you don't need to win the war. You just need to deprive your enemy of the conditions for victory, if you know what I mean. And especially an actor like China, which is a little bit more deliberate, if they perceive that, oh, you know, we won't be able to wrap this up in a few days and we won't be able to achieve our aims immediately, they may be more reluctant to engage in much more direct military action. So yeah, I think those two aspects of the anti-access agenda are very important for all countries in the region to consider and to invest in, rather than necessarily, matching China aircraft for aircraft and five generation aircraft for 5th-generation aircraft and all of that sort of stuff is not quite so important, I think. So yeah, thank you for the question. It's a good one.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay, Professor Srabani, do you have any idea to this question? Do you want to give your response?
There's not much to respond beyond what has been said. So I think we'll move on to the next question then.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, Mr. Satrio. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. Good morning to all of the key speakers and fellow students. I'm Satrio. Currently, I'm working in the Indonesian Army and postgraduate international relation in University of General Ahmad Yani. And I have a question. So relating to the armed conflict in the Ukraine and also the Russian right now. So we know that the sanctions that have been given from the Western countries, like cut off from the SWIFT system and also ban of the export or import for some raw or the material. And my question is, will this sanction, economic sanction, will jeopardize to the BRICS? I mean, the alliance of the BRICS within the Brazil, Russia, India, and so on. And as far as I know, the SWIFT system will, when the SWIFT system is cut off, you cannot make a deal for the money to bank for each country. So it will be a problem. And what do you think about the energy security? Because we know also the gas prices also increases right now in United States and also in European Union. And if the gas prices increases take a long time, maybe it will cause another problem in another part of the world also. I think that's all for the question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Satrio. Panelists who wants to start to give response to the question? Start from Dr. Johannes first, or okay, come.
Thank you for the question. And well, first of all, I would like to say something about the BRICS. BRICS is not a formal alliance or actually anything important, because it is something that was invoked or said or whatever by somebody in Goldman Sachs. An analyst who I'm not even remember whose the name is. He basically at that time want to make kind of an argument like, there are like all these 5 growing countries, economically important, and Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and South Africa. And well, if we look at what happened in South Africa, the economy just tanked. And in Russia, it is now a kleptocracy. Well, it has always been a kleptocracy. In all of and Brazil is now a mess. And well, I think of all 5, and the only thing I want to, the 2 countries that I want to bet my money on is perhaps on the India and China, which is kind of still survive. But again, it is not a formal alliance or something. It is just something that was said by an analyst and Morgan's. Goldman Sachs analyst basically. So it has very, very little relevance in international relations, in my opinion. But about the resources crisis, that I think that's kind of more important. I think in the short run, yes, there will be like a problem. There will be like huge spike in gasoline prices, and sooner or later, I think it will also hit us, Indonesia and Japan and India. I don't think any country will be will not get any. Well, I don't think any can avoid getting the oil shock. But sooner or later, there will be more new actors coming in. In United States, there are frackings. Remember back in 2000, I think it was in 2008 or 9. Where the oil price was so high that the several areas just went bankrupt because they cannot they cannot buy the fuel anymore. And then the United States just turn on the spigot on fracking. They just fracking all over the place, and bam, the oil price just collapsed until like around $30 a barrel. I think in the medium or long run, I'm not really that worried about the oil price, because sooner or later, if the price is high enough, people will jump in. It is the market economy basically. And and of course the Saudis and Kuwaitis and other countries in the Middle East, they also will look at what's going on here, and they will, if they think that the price will keep getting high, they will also want to jump on the bandwagon. Nobody dislike money anyway, so I think they will pump sooner or later. They will increase their output. Even today, OPEC has always been cheating on their quota. They always overproduce. So yeah, I think in short run, yes, there will be like pain in the fuel price, and I think the Democrats are also worried in the United States. I think Democrats are going to lose better in the midterm because of the oil price, but again, in the long run, I don't think it will be this problematic in terms of the price.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Johannes. Dr. Corey or Professor Srabani want to give a more response to the questions? Welcome.
Sure. Yeah, I'll work backwards from the energy security issue. Yeah, I agree with Johannes. I mean, like every time there's a crisis of energy, there's, the world doesn't necessarily stop. There are some adjustments we have to make, even going back into the 70s. But, I mean, energy is freely available, it's fungible, it's elastic, as they say in economics. And, we always managed, even with fossil fuels, natural gas, oil, we managed to find it somewhere. There might be temporary increases in oil, but someone else will take up the slack somewhere else eventually when they see that. So I think that will not be so much of an issue for a lot of countries. What I am interested in is how it may sort of stimulate the interest in renewables, but even more so, even for nuclear power as well, because there's an interesting thing here where nuclear power offers, basically it's any country, even a country like Japan, which has zero natural resources, it offers them an opportunity to generate electricity themselves. And so, plus the fact that it's a low carbon form of energy, there is sort of, I think what the Russia invasion has done is sort of refocus people that, it's not just yes, it's scary, but it is low carbon, so it has environmental benefits. But also, if we can reduce our dependence on potential bad actors like Russia or, other countries that tend to be oil rich, then maybe that's worthwhile sort of rethinking again. So I don't think this debate will happen instantly, but it may be something to keep an eye on going forward. In terms of the BRICS, again, I think, as Johannes said, it's not an alliance. But I do think, though, that if the sanctions are left in place too long, and if Russia is choked economically, much in the same way that Iran has been, over time, it would make sense for the BRICS countries to start thinking about alternative arrangements for global finance. I mean, you look at all the countries, Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia, China, South Africa, they're all fiercely independent countries in their foreign policy. They have, almost at times sort of a very anti-colonial sort of approach to the West, or at least in the past they have been. So, I could understand that all of them would see a sort of value in however they do it, to sort of start developing alternative financial mechanisms, just in case one of them is the future target of similar types of sanctions for one reason or another. But in the short term, I don't think the countries have anything in common with each other as such. there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Corey. Professor Shrabani, you want to give your idea? Welcome.
Yeah, energy security obviously becomes one place of importance as soon as you have this crisis, and which countries, like especially with respect to Russia, we have this, that Russia is an energy providing nation. As is well known that we would probably have a huge uptake in the renewable energy, people say, and maybe even nuclear energy would make its presence felt across. But with respect to the financial system, I think we are in for some game-changing options that would get created because of the critical technologies that are allowing the financial system across the world to question the current regime of financial system and move it maybe to a different regime, because the cryptocurrency, much in news these days, is probably the place, when sanctions of the kind that has come up with SWIFT code sanctions on Russia, crypto becomes a very, alternative for transactions, and how we as a community create a global governance for this cryptocurrency would, I think, consume attention. Therefore, I personally feel that it is the financial system will also need to be looked into because of the technological change that is already been in progress and might have a better footing because of the current crisis. BRICS would, I think, as is known, that it is not an official thing. It's an engagement among the alternative economies that were coming into play in the global economic order. I think there would be recalculations of many countries, and especially if Russia is considered to be an aggressor and therefore needs to be contained in its military front, then the BRICS would probably become BICS and will not have part in it. And we would have the rest of them trying to contain or trying to come into some kind of an association in itself. But remember, the whole question that would automatically be, sorry for that interruption, it's 9 o'clock out here, so my engagements begins. Is the issue that would probably be always be the major focus in the world today is how is China going to react to all these events or all these developments. Each official statement by the Chinese government would be looked into and probably studied threadbare to give us an understanding of where China is going. And the entire issue would, in this particular crisis, would be that for us in the ASEAN Asian region would be how China calculates its own understanding from this particular crisis and how China takes it forward. I think that would be what would be consuming our attention in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have more questions from Mr. Franciscus. The short questions: if Indonesia abstains like the other states like China and India, is it impact to our geopolitics and our international relations? Maybe these questions relating to the resolutions that have been made in the United States about Ukraine and Russia. Okay, who wants to give this respond to this? Dr. Johannes?
Well, I mean, I don't think there will be that much of an impact for Indonesia to basically saying that of us refusing to condemn Russia. I mean, first, I mean, we are basically not in the. I mean, well, I mean, even though we always say that that we are champion of democracy and whatever. I mean, but by the end of the day, I mean, it doesn't really that much important in larger thing. I think. I mean, nobody's going to come back at us later and saying, hey, I mean, Indonesia refused to condemn. That means you are no longer the head of democracy. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to come us and saying like that. I mean, it's So I mean, so whether it's going to make people less willing to trade with us or no negotiation, I don't think so. I mean, and same thing with India. I don't think the cost for Indonesia and India to abstaining, to not condemning Russia is really that high. I mean, it is more a formality in my sense. So I don't see there will be like a long-term problem for either India or Indonesia. That's all. I mean, well, of course later maybe people can call us out for hypocrisy, but come on, I mean, words and sticks. That's basically what I mean. Things like that. I mean, it's basically just words. I mean, that's my opinion. But again, that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. I think there are several questions, but the question is similar and had been explained by our previous speakers. Then I would like to skip to another question from Farrell Naufal. The question is, the United Nations recently passed a resolution for Russia to end the war and withdraw troops immediately. However, even though Indonesia and hundreds of other countries agree with this demand, Russia, as the Security Council, has the right to refuse. In other words, these demands cannot really end the war. In your opinion, can this war end peacefully, or it could even trigger World War III? Okay, this is our student question. Yeah, who wants to start and give response? Maybe Dr. Corey or Professor Sarabani, welcome.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, I mean, of course, both options are on the table, although I think World War III is a little, unless there's like, you know, somebody imposes a no-fly zone or something like that, I think the World War III scenario is a little bit maybe more far-fetched. Ending peacefully, I also have some doubts, but I guess it is possible that there could be some peace agreement depending on how diplomacy and maneuvering vis-a-vis Putin is done. There is actually, probably you don't want to go for regime change because that may make Putin be a little bit too aggressive, but I think there is, you know, you need to apply pressure to him over a concerted period of time. But yeah, I mean, there are people who are much better experts than me on Russia and the Ukrainian situation who are a little bit pessimistic right now about it ending anytime soon. So I think the greatest, most likely option is maybe a few years of sort of lower level operations, and we'll see how that sort of unfolds over time. In terms of the United Nations issue, I think this current conflict has just added to a long line of situations where the United Nations and the Security Council have completely failed. I think at least in I don't know about in the emerging world, but I know in a lot of the OECD countries, and even in Japan, which is usually one of the most pro-UN, we shouldn't do anything without a UN resolution country, people are no longer getting much less interested in this norm, seeing it as a place where decisions can actually be made. So, you know, when United Nations, you know, like the development program, they do some very good things, you know, sustainable development goals and all of that. But in terms of the operations of the General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council, I have noticed that there's actually very much less interest in the United Nations in a lot of OECD countries recently. So the fact that perhaps Indonesia and India are not sponsoring these resolutions may not necessarily be a huge issue. What will be more important perhaps for India and Indonesia may be what they actually do next. Do they enable Russia by, you know, doubling down on strengthening the relationships, which maybe in a way China looks like it is currently? That will be viewed more negatively in the long term than necessarily whether some resolution is agreed to or sponsored or not. So that's my point of view on that, at least anyway.
Okay, Professor Sarabani. Okay.
You're mute.
Yeah. I always feel been concerned that probably the Ukraine crisis also throws open this entire discussion back into what the permanent members of the Security Council, whether to expand it, because it definitely shows that at certain point of time, the Security Council decision actually goes against the whole approach of United Nations, which was supposed to be peaceful world. Of course, World War III was something that often, was made use of in movies, and it seems to be hitting reality at this point of time. But I think my understanding is that it is not something as an alternative, would not be the last alternative probably on the table. And it is not, I don't see it as something that would probably consume this world. With respect to the other side of it, will it end in a peaceful situation? This is where I really query and question, because conflicts that has risen before, especially in the Middle East, hasn't led to a peaceful solution. So my fear is we will have, a very mucky kind of thing. It will continue to be there. There might be certain, sometime easing, sometime more difficult times for Ukraine. And slowly people will go back to their lives, and Ukraine would be the, something that would continue to be there and consume the world time and again when things becomes difficult. But United Nations, what I definitely feel a little anxious about this time is even the other chains like UNICEF, etc., haven't come up strongly against Russia, considering humanitarian cause is very, very evidently visible. This is something that even in Indian academics are questioning for India, because we have had, death of a student also on the, in the event of this Ukraine crisis, and we have not seen much of a noise made diplomatically. Diplomacy always has to be much more objective and much more practical. And I think that is where India today is sort of bidding time and watching the event very carefully to come up to a conclusion. And I think as the time rolls on, we will see much more constructive diplomatic engagement. And my take is that Russia would have to be given some kind of a exit policy, which is currently not visible in the world, events that has been. But Russia will look at an exit policy where Russia can also say that, okay, we've won our cause. So that I think would be the fundamental defining position. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Come, Dr. Johannes.
Well, how the conflict ends in Ukraine, I mean, it really depends on what you mean by peaceful. I mean, peaceful also means that everybody's dead. I mean, it is also peaceful. But seriously, I mean, I don't think that Russia is willing to lose, basically. I don't think Russia is going to say, oh, we messed up, we are going to withdraw. I mean, Putin is not stupid. I mean, he watched history. I mean, Tsar Nicholas II deposed and killed because he lost the First World War. And Khrushchev, he also got deposed by Brezhnev because he lost the Cuban Missile Crisis. And in this case, Putin himself, I mean, I don't think Putin, I think Putin will look at history and then think that, if I lost this gamble, then they will kick me out. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest fear. I mean, there are arguments like Putin already make sure that he can that nobody's going to depose him, but that's not the same thing. I mean, already say that. I mean, all dictators say that they got kicked out. So I think Russia will. I mean, I think there are two scenarios. I mean, when I said that about earlier, like whether Russia wins big or they are going to limited win, it is this thing that I'm kind of focusing here. I mean, if what I mean by in the scenario where Russia got blooded badly and they want to say, okay, I mean, we are going to stop the war, to stop fighting, but I think they will try to make Ukraine a de facto separation in Ukraine, not unlike the North Korea, basically. I mean, that's why I think it's within end game now. They want to make he wants to make sure like there's no way Ukraine can hit back. I mean, there will be like revenge, trying to reunite Ukraine and movement. So I think the goal now is to bloody Ukraine, and then there's just this, and then just declare a unilateral ceasefire. I think that's his goal, because now that he already lost a lot of his soldiers and lots of his equipment to farmers. I mean, there's no way he can come back and say, oh, you know, we lost. I mean, and let's move on, right? I mean, that's all I can say that, because people already pissed off. So I think that's my North Korea scenario in Ukraine. Basically, Putin is going to declare unilateral ceasefire, maintain conflict, and because otherwise there's no good way for him to withdraw. He cannot win big unless he's going to use, or is going to go out using nukes, and that's going to destroy his propaganda anyway. Remember, he said that he was invading Ukraine to give them aid because Ukrainians are suffering under Nazis, so he's liberating them. Then suddenly, when the mob, and then all the bombings are destruction, basically just destroy his legitimacy. So that's my feeling. I mean, we will see. I mean, we will see like a new North Korea in Ukraine, basically. Unilateral ceasefire, and then just maintain it until the cows come home. That's my feeling.
Okay, all right. There is a participant who wants to give questions. He's a raised hand, Mr. Zaki.
Okay, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure for me. And I'm sorry because I cannot use the breakdown if my device doesn't support that. I have a question about what's happening on the world for Dr. Johannes, Dr. Wallace, Professor Srabani, and Dr. Samnijata. Okay, let me explain first. Okay, my name is Zaki from Universitas Jenderal Ahmad Yani from International Relationship. Okay, as we know that history works like not like point A to point B, but human historical works like a spiral. Like it means that history repeats itself. Now, the one that I want to know from you that from these last few years, as we know that there are economic war, after that pandemic, as we know, COVID-19, and then after that today's event is Russia's invasion on Ukraine. Okay, from that, I want to know, is there any historical events like this one? So we could know what's happening and what best we can do from each of your point of view. Yeah, like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Zaki. A great question, Zaki. Okay. Welcome, Dr. Johannes. He is a Dr. Johannes student, I think. Okay, come.
I don't know. I mean, I always hate the word. I mean, the argument that history is repeated again and again. I mean, because if you really look at history, I mean, there are just a lot of different variables going on. I mean, and it's kind of hard saying that, history is repeating again. Of course, we can learn the pattern from history. There are a lot of patterns going on. I mean, we can use it as our case study to understand like what's going on. But if you say that, history is repeating again, no, I'm not buying that. But is there any case in history about this? I think the best case that people keep using, and I agree, is Finland. Is the Winter War in Finland in 1940. Russia invaded Finland, and they got blooded badly in Finland. Basically, there are there's a joke in Finland. I mean, a Finnish general was asked, like, do you afraid of so many Russians around you? And he said, well, I mean, they're closer. I mean, a lot of Russians here in Finland. And the question asked, like, wow, Russians are here in Finland. Where are they? Well, 6 feet underground. So basically, they died because, due to the Winter War. I mean, that's the joke in Finland.
Oke. Oke, ngomong.
Oke. Well, I guess. Okay. Okay, well, I mean, again, I think, I guess, again, I'm going to repeat. I'm going to repeat this. I mean, the analogy I can think of is the Winter War between the Soviet Union and Finland. Well, I mean, even until today, there was a joke in Finland. Basically, an old general was asked by somebody like, you are so close to Russia. I mean, are you afraid of them? He basically said, why? They are so close to us. They're basically all over us. And the answer and the reply is, really? I mean, where are the Russians? I mean, well, there are 2 million of them 6 feet underground. So basically, the Russians got blooded badly in the Winter War with Finland, and while Russia won and then took over some of Finland's territories, but by the end of the day, they never come back to Finland. Even though by the Second World War, Finland actually joined the Nazis, the Hitler, to invade Soviet Union. And even after the end of the Second World War, Russia just said, "Okay, you lost, give us more territory, and then we just let you off," because they got so traumatized hitting Finland. So, that's, I guess, the only analogy I can think of, and maybe that can be a model for Ukraine also. I mean, they should put a sign on their border saying that beware of our farmers, and then the Russian will know we don't know there to cost, but.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Johannes. I think we need to end our conversation this morning at maximum at 11 a.m. And now is 10:54. I would like to say thank you very much to all of our great guest speakers. Thank you very much, Professor Srabani, for your time and your brilliant idea, and also the idea that you have shared to us, and also to all the participants. Thank you very much, Professor. And also to Dr. Corey. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us on this webinar. There are a lot of questions also in my mind, but I think we have no much time to give you a simple question actually, but next time maybe we have time to speak more detail about the idea of the AUKUS and also Quad. There are a lot of questions about this because sometimes, and we look into the mass media, especially China said that now America tried to build a new NATO in Asia, is it? Then we need to discuss about this suspicious. Okay. And also thank you very much to Dr. Johannes Sulaiman for the great idea, and also some perspectives about what happened in Ukraine. Thank you very much. Before we end this conversation, would you like to give your last statement to all the participants, or key statement, or you want to give to us, and we can keep in mind your key statement on your idea that you said to us? Start from Dr. Corey.
Yeah, I guess my key statement or theme is be prepared, and even if you can't do everything, you can do something and it still makes a difference. So I think that is the important lessons we can take away from a lot of these different types of events.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Doctor. Okay, welcome, Professor Srabani.
India is walking a tightrope situation right now. I think with time to come, I think we will have a much more clarity and direction about our diplomatic relations. But as far as the academic community feels, I can vouch that we're looking at more middle power engagements such that we create a much more balanced approach towards it and forget the game of superpower contests, and I think I would probably pitch myself out there at this point of time. Thank you.
Great statement. I will remember that, Professor. Thank you so much. Okay, welcome, Dr. Johannes.
Dr. Johannes. Well, I mean, I don't think I have anything to add except to say thank you very much to my great colleagues here, Professor Srabani and Kari, my best friends here. I mean, and I really hope that you both enjoy our webinar today, and I really hope that we can work again in near soon. And thank you for everybody who listened to us.
Yeah, I hope to come to Indonesia sometime soon when
Welcome.
everything opens up.
In-person meeting is designed by only person, I think.
Okay, Professor Srabani, also welcome to Indonesia if you want to come here.
Yeah, in-person meetings are very much needed. You know, we're tired of this online engagements, I think. You could have carried this discussion beyond, could have probably engaged much more, looking towards much more varying ideas. Thank you so much for this invite. It was really a pleasure being with all of you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for our moderator, Mr. Stanley Jatta, PhD, has impressively guided the discussion. The next event is the giving of token of appreciation to the speakers. To this session, Vice Dean of Academic Visip Unjani, Dr. Swartisari, will present to the representative of speaker, Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman. Please kindly stand up to the front.
Basically, I will keep your plaques for both of you. When you come here, we can give it to you. This is traditional beggar.
All right, thank you very much for the speaker, Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman, and also Vice Dean of Academic in Visip Unjani. Please have a seat. For the next event is Singing Bagimu Negeri, so all audience are kindly requested to stand up. Please have a seat.
Langsung TV mati.
All right, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our seminar. I and all committees apologize if we made mistake during this seminar. Thank you very much for our keynote speaker, Dr. Wallace, Dr. Yohanes Sulaiman, Professor Shrabani, and also our moderator, Stanley Jatah, PhD. See you in the next international seminar of Master of International Relations on August 2022. All the audience are allowed to leave the Zoom meeting. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.